Hello everybody, it's Grandmama. Time for another story from a hometown scrapbook by Ben Weatherwax. Leo Lomski. Hello there. There's a legend that persists about a Grays Harbor sporting figure that contends that one of the greatest ring fighters who ever lived was at one time a resident of Grays Harbor. And more than that, the legend has it that only the narrowest of circumstances separated this local resident from the top of the heap and the world acclaimed that came so near to being his. And the legend is supported, unlike many other legends, by a heap of facts that make this story both color-packed and stirring to those who knew the man. For although he has long since dropped off the pinnacle and the luster that was his fisticuff days has been rubbed off by an assortment of unromantic activities, to those who's watched his rise from a willing youngster with two flying fists to an almost top rung of the ladder, it's a story long to be remembered. So when George is taking his customary few seconds for our sponsor, we'll tell you the story of Leo Lomski, the Yakima farm boy who came within a blow of winning the world's title for Grays Harbor back in the gay 1920s, and who was called one of the greatest natural fighters of all time. And now, George, a word from our sponsor. The scene is a naval training station in California, the year 1916. A card of amateur fights is being staged by the recreation and morale officer of the station, and he's looking for fighters. He has signed an assortment of experienced and hardened scrappers, and the card is complete except for one man in the welterweight poundage. He was rangy, hard-punching platoon leader who is without an opponent, and after searching vainly for the right man, the matchmaker leaves it to the platoon leader to find his own appointment. The platoon leader starts his search in his own platoon. One morning, 2 days before the fight card is scheduled, he lines up the platoon and invites any of them in their many outfits who doesn't deserve to see eye to eye with him to take a poke at him. Not there and now, but in the ring on the night of the big fight. A young seaman named Leo Lomski steps out from the line and offers to take a poke at the platoon leader anywhere and any time. When the bouts were fought, Lomski found himself in the ring for the first time, facing his platoon leader, a clever boxer and a hard puncher, an old hand at the game. 2 rounds later, Lomski's hand was being raised in a token of victory. He had knocked out his opponent in 1 minute of the second round. In the months that followed, the young Pole became a favorite of the boxing fans. He fought at the top of the card. He headlined 3 big Navy cards and won all the fights by knockout. And then at the age of 21, when most lads were starting out in the world, Leo came home to the family ranch in Grandview near Yakima and worked in the alfalfa fields. He was not interested in boxing. It had been a sport that he had been associated with in the Navy, the World War in far places, and right there the great fighter would have been lost to the ring if it hadn't been for a coincidence. In Yakima one Saturday night, a young farmhand saw the handbill inviting beginner fighters to match their purses for $25 to the winner. The fighting part of it didn't impress him, but the $25 did. All week, as he worked on the farm, he thought about how easy it would be to collect $25. That Saturday, he went to town and signed for one of the bouts. In the preliminaries of the beginner's card, he knocked out the fighter named K.O. Weeks in 4 rounds, collected his money, and went back to the fields. But the easy money gave him an idea. If he could do it once, why not twice? When the crops were in that fall, he packed his Navy sea bag and started out to conquer the world. He headed for Cottonwood, Idaho, fought Art Rhodes and won 6 rounds. Next to Greenville, Idaho, where he knocked out Ralph Hoskins in the second. Then a string of small towns down the spine of the Rockies, where he left behind an assortment of battered and bewildered boxers. But there was not always $25 coming for. Sometimes the cards didn't draw flies, and after a few bouts for which he collected nothing, Leo took a job near Lewiston on the business end of a cross-cut saw-cutting fence post. But he listed his name in the promoter in Lewiston, and when a second card was arranged, he came to town for the bout. That's the way it happened, to fight Lee Martin, who was just about the top dog in the fighting game in the Inland Empire. Lee's opponent backed out of Lewiston's card fight, and the promoter sent a hurried call for Leo. Lomski dropped his crosscut at noon and hurried to town. He arrived just in time to crawl into the ring and pummel Lee into oblivion in 8 rounds, and set the whole Northwest talking. Then came the bad luck fight of Cecil Manning. Leo won it in 12 rounds, but fought the last 3 with some broken ribs. But his star was rising. The fighting pool had a taste of victory, and he wasn't to be stopped. He went to Portland to head a card and beat Red Campbell. But his broken ribs had not healed, and the pain he suffered discouraged him. That night after the fight, Leo threw his sea bag onto the coastal freighter and went south to San Francisco, where he longshored on the waterfront. In Wallace, Idaho, he worked in a mine. The bright young lad who had set the Northwest fisticuff world on fire with his win over Martin Lee was all about forgotten. And then came Chet McIntyre. Under McIntyre's tutelage, McIntyre was an old hand at the game. He gave Leo the first real training and intelligent handling the young fighter had ever known. Under McIntyre, Lomski won 16 fights in 1922 and 23. His end of the purse was now the winner's end of the main event. He had struck it rich. He married, and in the summer of 1923, touring the coast on a vacation, his wife picked Grays Harbor as a place she wanted to settle down and raise their family. And Grays Harbor liked the idea of having an up-and-coming welterweight around. Promoter Eddie Etcher made Leo an inviting deal to move to the harbor. Leo went back to Idaho, fought and won 3 fast fights for McIntyre, then picked up his family's possessions and headed for Aberdeen. It was a booming, carefree Grays Harbor that Lomski family moved to. The lumber market was good, and up and down Heron Street business bustled. Behind the counters at the smoke shop, George Bates was talking up the fight game. The appetite of the harbor's fight fans was whetted by the showing of the young Ted Crutch, the welter with a terrific punch, who had headlined the bouts at the old Grand Theater. When Leo came to town, the word was passed along the sporting grapevine that the good-looking fighter had joined up with Etcher's stable. Nothing like Cratch or Dodd, Barcott or Roscoe or Jensen, but he looked promising. Leo didn't make much money during his first years in Grays Harbor, but he got in a lot of fighting. He fought an average of every 2 weeks for pin money, in preliminaries and benefit bouts. He was no wizard at mathematics, but with a pencil and a few minutes, he could figure that he'd make more working on the waterfront. And he was just about to toss the fight game out the window when a Seattle matchmaker bid for him to face up with the up-and-coming Bert Colma in a big holiday fight in Seattle. Leo accepted and won his fight with a knockout in the second. He also won the attention of Seattle's fighting fans, for Bert Colma was the holder of the Pacific Coast middleweight title. What no one had counted on had happened. Lomski had lifted the crown off the champ's head in a fight that had been figured for a setup. It was now 1925, and the young puncher from Iker's stable, held the coast title and was the only Northwest fighter who could pack the Seattle ballpark for a rematch. Leo was now on the glory road, and Grays Harbor, not slow to claim him, cheered for him in an echo. In 1926, he went south for a series of fights in Los Angeles and lost a 10-round decision to Joe Roach. A cut open above his eye hampered him throughout the fight, although he fought Roach again and knocked him out. The mark of that loss set him back in his climb. It was 1926 that Leo fought Jack Malone and Harry Dillon and came away with a Coast light heavyweight title. And now Grays Harbor was his for the asking. In the first days of 1927, he was matched against the great fighter Tiger Flowers in Los Angeles, and Grays Harbor made a path to attend. Aberdeen banker Billy Patterson chartered a bus, and business and industrial firms drew straws amongst the employees for the 2 seats allotted to each. A week before the fight, a busload of Lomski's fans left Aberdeen for Los Angeles to back the Harbor fighter, who was known as the Aberdeen Assassin. When Lomski battered Flowers out of the boxing game, Grays Harbor, which had followed the blow-by-blow account of the fight on the wire, started a drive to show Leo the home port was proud of him. A gift for Lomski fund was started, but Lomski was traveling too fast to stop for presents. He ensconced his wife and 2 children in a brand new house on the West 7th Street in Aberdeen and took off for New York and the big time. And although Grays Harbor couldn't follow at that distance, Heron Street was there in spirit. In his eastern flight, Leo licked the best in the country. Harold Mays went down before his sledgehammer pounding, Maxie Rosenblum and Yale Oakham, and came the big fight. Leo was matched with the world's light heavyweight title holder Tommy Logan in Madison Square Garden. George Bates arranged for a special wire to report the fight, and the Harbor hung on every blow. When Leo floored the champ twice in the first round, the Harbor went wild. Nothing could have stopped him now. But the assassin of Aberdeen closed for the kill in the second and every round thereafter. The champ outboxed and outgeneraled the Aberdeen fighter. The savage punches that could have won the fight had it landed never connected again with the champ. It was the blow, the sporting world agreed, that separated Grays Harbor kingpin fighter from the world's title. Leo came home after the Logren fight and received his gift from the admirers, but it was a brand new Studebaker car presented with the appropriate ceremonies. 10 days later, he demolished it in a highway accident. But he was still able to hang on to his money, and in the 1913, he was a model husband, a successful businessman, and still a contender in the fight world. Fight-wise followers knew it, but it seldom said it out loud. Leo had hit his peak and was on the way down on the other side. But fighting was now his business. He slugged it out in main events all over the Northwest. But through the years, tough roads were ahead. Box offices fell off. His investments soured. The pounding he had taken in the ring began to tell on him. He tangled with the law. Promoters dropped him. And he began to drift as younger, up-and-coming fighters moved in. Like countless others before him, Leo became a has-been and dropped out of the picture except to promote an occasional wrestling bout. Today, there are many Grays Harborites who have all but forgotten the story of the Aberdeen Assassin who came within a single blow of winning the world's title. But old-timers who follow the game get a smug and satisfied look when they focus their memory on the gay 1920s and the fight game. Leo Lomski, they'll tell you, was more than just a ghost of Stanley Ketchel. He was the greatest fighter ever produced in the West, and if he could have landed just one more Sunday punch, the world's champ. And such we accord him in a page tonight in our hometown scrapbook. Thanks for listening.